Welcome to On the Beat. Today I'm sitting with Dr. Andy Barlow, and he is with the Chiropractic Physician Center of Tupelo. And Dr. Barlow, in your latest book, Code Breaker, you mentioned head trauma and how it affects our health and our body.
Yep.
And so tell us a little bit about how that affects our overall health.
Okay, so when we have head trauma, now remember there can be multiple types, and that could be football, soccer, basketball, baseball. One of the things I talk about in my book that's often overlooked is trauma, physical trauma, and emotional trauma. Now, difficult to comprehend, but nevertheless true. Your brain can't differentiate the two.
That's fascinating. I have no idea.
And that's why you need to get my book.
Exactly.
and so let's use head trauma because it's easier to explain. So let's say that I have a car crash and I have a whiplash injury. So inside of our brain, we have neurons. These are the little cells that are in our brain. We have 86 billion of those, okay? And we have these little supportive cells that are called glial cells. And there's 10 glial cells to every one neuron. Okay, so do that math. And,
Too much.
Yeah, and so those glial cells, they're supportive. But, well, think about it like this. It's like someone comes to your house and cleans it. Okay, that's what glial cells do. They vacuum your rug, they clean your house. But when you have a head trauma, they kind of go rogue. Now, I know you're too young to remember this, but in Looney Tunes, you remember the Tasmanian?
I do remember.
Remember Tasmanian Devil?
Yep.
And he goes crazy. Well, I talk about that in my book. And see, these glial cells, what they do they're no longer housekeepers, they turn into the Tasmanian Devil. And they go through and destroy brain function. And sometimes this can even go on for years, okay? New studies have linked head trauma to actually dementia and Alzheimer's as one of the codes to that, okay? Now, one of the missing links that I talk about in my second #1 best-selling book, it's called The Highway to Health, and it's the gut-brain connection. There's a nerve called the vagus nerve that goes from your brain to your gut that actually controls gut motility. It actually can prevent you from having a leaky gut. So that's one of the causes of a leaky gut syndrome is head trauma. Typically within about 7 days after head trauma, a person has the potential of developing a leaky gut. So somebody has a car wreck 20 years ago, and then now they have brain fog and focused attention, depression, anxiety. Now I'll ask them, I'm like, well, tell me about your gut, how well it's working. And they're like, oh, it's terrible. So see, there's that link there, and that's why doctors can actually address the problem, because you go to a neurologist working on your brain, you go to a gastroenterologist working on your gut, and nobody's actually looking at the whole body.
Absolutely. Now, the emotional trauma, talk about that.
Well, the emotional part of that is, and I'm going to have to use a neurological term, it's called the orbital prefrontal cortex. It's this little part of your brain right above your eye. And that orbital frontal, what it does, it actually inhibits these more primitive types of problems like panic, anxiety, fear, which hangs out in this part of our brain called the amygdala. And so whenever you can't inhibit that panic, anxiety, and fear, then our nervous system starts to become over-aroused, and then we start to get high blood pressure, sympathetic tone, we can't digest our food, we start to get cold hands and cold feet. So there's a correlation there between trauma, physical trauma, and emotional trauma as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Barlow. And if people would like to learn more about this, visit your practice, how do they get to you?
The best way to do that is to contact the number below.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Barlow. And that's today's On the Beat.